Hi everyone, this is Veronica with So It Seems, and welcome back to my studio. Today in the Dear Jane quilt book, we are going to be looking at block M-11, also called rickshaw. There are a couple different ways that this block could be done. You could take a large square of your background fabric and then applique 7 of these diamonds onto the block and then call it good. It's very clear that Jane did not do it in this method, and I do try to make my block look as similar to hers as possible. Sometimes I do go an easier route, but today I am not going to do the applique way of doing this. I do want to piece this one, and I think the easiest way to do this is to paper piece it. In paper piecing this block, it is going to have to be in sections. So the 2 outer diamond borders would be one section, and then that center diamond will be another section. But even within these sections, they have to be cut into sections. So I'll show you how I'm doing that. Let me show you the fabric that I've chosen for today. For my main foundation fabric, I've chosen this pink. Now with this pink, that's all I have. It's just this one little square. So I'm really hoping that will be enough for the diamonds that are in this block. And then my background is my muslin fabric. I photocopied the drawing of this block from the book so that I could cut it apart for the paper piecing. We're going to have our 3 sections, so these 2 side sections will be one unit that we work with. Then we have our middle and the side. Now within each of these sections, in order to get these side ones paper pieced, they do have to be cut. So you're going to be making one section and then the other, and then sewing those together, and that will be one unit. Same with the other side, we'll be doing the exact same thing. For the middle, in order to do the paper piecing properly, it's going to be cut into 3 sections. There's really no other way to do the paper piecing because of the way the fabrics would have to overlap. So we have our pieces. You'll want to cut these 3 apart so that you'll be piecing one strip here, one piece here, and one piece here. And then you'll sew those together. So once you have all of those 3 sections pieced and sewn together, then you can sew the block together. Let's first start with one of these side pieces. I've gathered together all the tools that I'm going to need for doing my paper piecing. I have my pattern piece that I'll be working on, my pins to hold the pieces on, thread, needle, my thimble. I always have to do hand sewing with that because it gets really rough on your fingers. My scissors, and then my most important tool for paper piecing is my add a quarter ruler. It's got that 1/4 of an inch lip on here so that it makes it much easier for when you need to fold over your pattern and create that 1/4 of an inch. And then this is my laminated straight edge so that I can do my fabric folding. I do have another video on paper piecing, which will go into more detail on how to do this method. I will try to link that down below. To start paper piecing, we'll use one of these pieces. It doesn't matter which one to start with. And whenever you're paper piecing, you have to remember that you're working in the reverse. So this is going to actually be the back side of your fabric. The front side will be on this side. So you have to think in reverse of everything that you're doing. So your fabric will go right side facing out and the back side here. I've cut a piece of fabric, and you want to make sure that you have enough room at all points so that you have that 1/4 of an inch all around. And I do, I've got that line in there. All of my areas, the farthest points have that 1/4 of an inch. So I am going to pin that in place. That way it won't move. Now, it doesn't really matter which side you do, but we're going to start working on the muslin. That I'm going to start with this side here. I've already trimmed my seam to 1/4 of an inch here. So now I'll need this piece of fabric to fit there. When I hold it over, I can see it needs to be a little bit more at an angle. One way that I make sure that my fabric will fit is that I will place it with that piece folded over, so that I know when it's sewn I have that 1/4 of an inch here, my 1/4 of an inch there. Now you see my fabric doesn't line up. I'm not worried about this overlap of fabric here because this is where I'm going to be stitching. I'll go ahead and trim that extra piece off. And now I should be able to press this open. Now I'll work on this side. I've got my muslin piece here that's going to go into this spot, and right sides together. Now it's, with muslin, it can go either way. But I line up that straight edge. When I fold this over, you can't see it, but I can feel where my fabric is. My fabric is right there. So I'll move it down just a little. Okay. Then I'm going to stitch this seam. And here's our second muslin piece sewn on and pressed. And it looks really good. We have plenty of seam allowance. Okay, now we're going to trim this last seam and get that one ready. So I have a piece here that looks like it will fit. So right sides together again. Make sure that when you are doing the paper piecing at the beginning, at the end of each row or each stitch, right at that corner, wherever you wherever that pattern starts, make sure to do a back stitch or knot your thread so that it doesn't come unraveled when you want to start sewing it all together. With paper piecing, it tends to be smaller pieces, and so there is more of a tendency for real small pieces to just start coming undone. So just make sure that you have your stitches anchored with a knot at the beginning and end. And here is one part of that unit finished. You can see here's the side that you will see. Now, do not remove the pin, but what you need to do is mark your stitching line all around. And then you can also trim the 1/4 of an inch all around, but definitely mark your stitching line because that's what you're going to need. You don't need that for this. You can just trace, because that is your stitching line that you will be following when you start getting the pieces all put together. Once you have your stitching line all marked on there, and I went ahead and trimmed my block, you can take off your template. You're going to do this 3 more times for this particular shape. When you finish paper piecing your unit, you will have 4 that all look similar to this. They are going to be in the same direction. We're going to take 2 of them and create one of the little border sections. So you'll take one and flip it around, and they're going to be stitched together in this way. We've already drawn our line when we did the paper piecing. So when we flip it over, we're going to find that corner, that little joint. You're going to put your pin right where that line is and also where that seam is. Now to join it to this side, we're going to pin right into this seam here, but where that line is. So I think it's going to be about there. Flip it over. I'm off just a little bit. So I'm going to get my pin right on that line. And once again, it is right where that seam is. So we're going to line up that line. That's our center point. Now, this point right here, this little corner where the seam is, this will line up with the line that ends on the other side. So we'll get a pin in there, and I'm just a little off, so I'm going to adjust that. Okay, so those 2 pins are in position. And I'm going to get my last pin right here. And this point is going to line up with the seam over here. There. My pin is going, it's right on the line, and this is where the seam is that I sewed. Okay, I've got this pinned. So now I'm just going to stitch along this line here. This is my little diamond unit all stitched, and this is the orientation that Jane has it in her block. In Brenda's drawing, she has the block turned so it's in this way, but this fits better on my screen. So this is one. We're going to do the same thing for the other one. The 2 side strips are completed. On the back side, they do have the stitching lines. I'm not going to worry about trying to trim anything up until I'm ready to stitch those to the center unit. Now let's work on the center unit. This is also going to be paper pieced, but I need to do it in 3 sections. It won't work to do just all in one. So I've cut these into 3 sections so that we'll be able to do 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll stitch them all together. This is going to be using the same method as I did for the other triangles. This one will be a simple one. I'll just have my center diamond cut first, and then I will stitch these 2 triangles on in the background. For each of these end pieces, I'll start the same way with the center diamond, the 2 triangles, and then the final piece will be the outer triangle in the background. I have the 3 segments sewn for the center of this block, and on each one I've drawn my stitching line all around. Now we're going to do the same thing as we did with the other strips, is we're going to start pinning these together. And when I line this up, we're effectively going to be in this kind of a setup. So my points that are going to be matching is going to be here and here. 2 pieces are sewn together, and now we're going to get the last piece pinned on there and doing the same thing, matching up the points and then stitching up this line. The center strip is done. So now we're going to bring in the 2 outer strips, and we're going to be sewing that together. The main parts that we're going to be focusing on are matching up the points of these diamonds to the outer diamonds. This is where our lineup points are going to be. So just as I've done with the other pieces, I'm going to have my pin go right through that point, and it's going to go through that point. So I have one pin there, and I'll do the same over here, going through that point of the diamond and then through the point of the other diamond. So I have those 2 pinned. I flip it over, my pin is going right through that line. And then I'm also going to put a pin through these corners here. So I've got that line. The reason that I am also pinning the end is just to keep my seam from getting skewed. It's easy to do in paper piecing, especially to get these end points just really getting off center, or just getting off the line that they need to be on. So I've got that entire row pinned. I might also put a pin right in the middle here, just to keep that from getting off. Yep, I'm right on the fabric, I'm right on the line there. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch this line. Once you have one diamond strip sewn on, do the same to the other side. The hard part of this block is now finished. We've got the entire diamond center done. My block does have a few little issues. If you look closely, my diamond points are starting to kind of disappear just a little on these 2. I trimmed up just a little bit, but not very well, just because I am cutting it close on some of my seams. But the beauty of this block is that the final part is putting a border all around out of the muslin. So this block ends up, the center part is just over 4 inches. It's about 4 1/8 of an inch. So I am going to cut strips that are about 4 1/4 inches long, and then the width I'm going to cut 1 1/4 inches. It'll be wider than what I need, but it will give me that room to be able to trim it to size. So I'm going to cut my strips. I'm going to cut 2 of them to be about 4 1/8 and then 1 1/4 wide. And then for the final one on the other side, I'm going to cut those also 1 1/4 inches wide, but then they're going to be about 5 1/8 or 5 1/4 inches long. The borders are stitched on, and when I put my trimming ruler over it, you can see I've got plenty of room around to trim this block. So I'm going to trim this to size. And there is the trimmed block. It has a really nice polished look now, and it's the perfect size. Once it's trimmed up like that, you can't even tell that there might be a little bit of a variance in some of the sizes of the borders. If you look really closely and you measure, this one's just a little bit wider, a little bit narrower than this one, but overall, the block, you can't tell. Well, I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough of making block M-11, also called rickshaw. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below, or you can send me an email at soitseemscreations@outlook.com. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. You can like my channel and subscribe, and click that notification bell so that you'll be notified each time I upload a video, which is every Monday. This is Veronica Johnson with Sew It Seams, and I'll see you next time.